Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Exploring Pathways in Core Energetics. As we all are continuing to enter here, I'm just going to wait a couple of more moments just so some of the bells and whistles subside so you can hear what I'm saying. But welcome to this evening that is sponsored by Core Connect, which is the Alumni Network. And with that, I'm just going to hope the bells and whistles don't take up too much of our time. So welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday evening to you. I'd like to welcome you to our second annual alumni panel. My name is Laura Conless, and I'm sure I know many of you, but many of you I don't, and it's really lovely to be with you tonight. I am the new board chair of the Institute. One of our panelists, as we'll soon meet, Teresa Moore Griffin, was the board chair for over 7 years. And as of July 1st, I have taken the reins, and it's my honor to hold space with you. I have also been the chair of the Alumni Committee, which we call Core Connect. And about a year and a half ago, when we decided to do this type of an evening, we thought, you know, people have a powerful experience and such a big transformative growth experience while at the school. And then oftentimes we have our pockets of friendships or colleagues, but what's really going on with how people bring core energetics into the world? So we had this idea to share our gifts. And for those of you who remember the work, the fourth stage of the work is really to be out in the world and to bring the work out into the world. So tonight is one glimpse of how 5 of your colleagues do that today in the lives that they lead. Just want to say we're joined by Lindsay Nagitaway, who is the executive director of the Institute, who is waving in her nice bright green shirt. And I am now going to turn over tonight's panel to Teresa Bullitt-Gordon, who has been the alumni administrator and marketing coordinator at the Institute. And she is your panel host for tonight. And I turn it over to you, Teresa, and enjoy.
Thank you, Laura. And thank you to all our panelists who are here today: Tristan, Avery, Valerie Green, Joanne Bagshaw, Teresa Moore Griffin, Isha Villa. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to all of you who are out there. As Laura said, my name is Teresa Bullitt-Gordon, and I graduated, just to let you know a little bit about me, I graduated in 2009. And I left the Institute for a bit to raise my son. And a couple years ago, I wanted to bring myself back in. And so this position became available. And so I've been doing the alumni programming and dabbling in the marketing at the Institute as well. So I'm excited to be here with all of you. I wanted to just lay out some quick housekeeping. So just so that everyone knows, this is being recorded, and the recording will go out to everyone who has signed up. We will have several opportunities for Q&A throughout the panel discussion. If you have a question, please hold on to your question until that time, and you could either put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. There's a little hand on the bottom of your screen, reaction. You can raise your hand and we will call on you to unmute and speak your question. You could ask your question as a general question. You could ask that question to a specific panelist, whatever you feel called to at that time. Also, please, if you can, please remain muted throughout the entire time, so that we can hear the panelists clearly. That will really help us, here. And yes, I think that is it for housekeeping. So I thought in true core fashion that perhaps we can do a bit of a grounding meditation just to kind of help us all arrive from wherever we're arriving from and to have us just be present in the moment. So if perhaps you can just close your eyes and just take a moment to make your body comfortable, adjusting or stretching as needed. And then just coming into a comfortable position, knowing that there's nothing to do. For the moment, all you need to do is listen to the sound of my voice and just allow yourself to slow down and to just land deeper inside of your own body. Begin to tune in to the natural rhythm of your breath as you inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth with perhaps a sigh or an ah sound. Breathing in and exhaling out with a sound. And one more time, breathing in and exhaling out with a sound. Allowing yourself to land and slowly, just begin to scan your body, starting with the crown of your head. And just notice if there's any muscles in the crown of your head or the back of your head or on your forehead that are tight or held. And with every inhale and exhale, just encourage the muscles to soften, the thinking to lessen. Begin to move to your face and notice if your brow is furrowed or if your cheeks are tight. Perhaps your mouth is held tightly, or perhaps your jaw is clenched. And just noticing and maybe doing something that will allow that to soften. Notice your shoulders. Are they held? Are they tight? Are you carrying the world on them? Can you just allow them to soften just for a little bit, just for this time? Feel your chest. Notice if there's any energetic armor around your heart. And notice if you can just allow that to just drop for this moment, for this time. Notice if your belly is held or if your hips are tight. Can you also soften those and open those just a little? And just allow yourself to keep experimenting with that softening and begin to really allow the weight of your body to press down into your seat. Noticing your legs, starting with your thighs, going down your calves and down towards your feet. Feel your feet on the ground and just notice how they're sitting on the ground. Are they holding the ground tightly? Are they hovering above? Or are they just there softly and soft, but connected to the earth? Just keep finding small ways to let go and allow the gravity to just settle you in. And slowly begin to bring awareness back to your breath. And orient yourself to the room that you're in, right? You're in a room in your home or in your office, and just orient yourself back the sounds, maybe the smells. And then just maybe perhaps placing one hand over your heart and one hand over your belly, or just palms in a receiving position. Just allow yourself to repeat either internally or externally if you'd like. I am here. I am here. And taking a few more deep breaths, you're just going to begin to open your eyes and adjust or stretch as you need so that you can begin to come back into the Zoom room and perhaps take a look at some of the faces that are here. And just, yeah, just allowing yourself to see each other and all these beautiful people who have come to listen to this discussion, and all the beautiful people who are here to talk to us today about what they're up to in the world. So to get us started, I thought that we could just start by introducing each panelist, introducing themselves. So if you can tell us your name, perhaps maybe the year you graduated from the Institute, and let us know what your work is in the world, what you're doing in the world right now. And if you could also give us your favorite go-to grounding exercise at the very end, that would be great. And if you could do 1 to 2 minutes each, that would help us make sure that we stay on time. Valerie, would you like to get us started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here. I graduated from the Institute in 2021, and I'm based out of Long Island City, Queens, New York City. And I have been running a dance not-for-profit for over 26 years called Dance Entropy, and a studio called Green Space for over 18 years. And the not-for-profit is a professional dance company that performs all over New York City, internationally, the US. I have a studio. It's a rehearsal space, class space, performance space that's nurturing choreographers and artists of all kinds. And then the last part of my not-for-profit is doing educational programming, working in the New York City schools, working in older adult centers, and doing a lot of work with movement and healing. And that's what sort of brought me to Core Energetics, is to do that work that I was already doing and to learn more and do it better. And so I'll share more about that later, but I am seeing people one-on-one. I lead a process group and doing this skimming the surface class all over that I'll talk about more, as I said. And my favorite grounding practice is actually the one we just did, and saying, I am here, connecting to my center and to the earth, and maybe just doing some bouncing to ground. Thank you. So I'm supposed to call on someone. How about Teresa?
Thanks, Valerie. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. Some faces I know, names I recognize, and others, hello. I'm Teresa Moore Griffin, and I graduated in 1997. Can you believe it? So I was at the Institute when John Farakis, the founder, was around and teaching still. So I had training with him. It was just quite amazing. I'm also a graduate of the 5th year at the Institute, and so happy I did that, and interned briefly in the early 2000s, maybe in the year 2000. I worked as an intern for a bit. Since 2016 until June 30th of this year, I was on the board, and for most of that time served as chair of the board. Yeah, so it was quite an experience, a great experience in so many ways. And I was involved in the recruitment and selection of Lindsay Gidiwe to come and be with us as our leader. So I'm very pleased about that. My work in the world is, I did a teeny tiny core practice with just a few clients while I was doing my other work. My work in the world is that of an organization development practitioner, and I do executive coaching. And I've had the privilege and pleasure of working all over the world doing that work. And I also had the privilege of taking core energetics to my clients in China back before COVID knocked us for a loop. And my favorite grounding activity is to breathe and to literally feel my butt and back against the chair and my feet on the floor. It just helps me to feel present and like I have gravity. So that's what I would share with you. And Isha, I'll invite you to be next.
Thank you, Teresa. My name is Isha. I graduated in 2018. And the work I'm doing right now is applying core energetics to money and finance by helping people get to the source of their money issues, whether that's scarcity or fear of it running out, or simply not making enough and feeling like they're just not letting it in, or they're just kind of blocked in some way, right? And I do that using a combination of core energetic body work and mindset. I'm also a licensed provider in financial services, so I also help people create tailored and comprehensive financial plans. And I work within a team in the finance industry, and so I've actually brought core work into that space as well, as a leadership mentor and helping people move energy. Like, we're all entrepreneurs together. So before I was a licensed financial professional, I was working mostly with entrepreneurs, and I still do. I still run group programs and do individual coaching with folks outside of finance industry. But within that, I also bring a little bit of that entrepreneurial coaching, mindset, embodiment, confidence work, all of that stuff that goes along with, the entrepreneurship has its challenges. And I really love that space in particular around visibility and around really speaking your truth in your marketing, and how to do a sales call where you feel like you're holding a person's humanity, right? And helping them make a decision about whether or not they want to work with you. Yeah, so that's all really fun for me. And my favorite grounding practice is lifting weights. I feel it anchors me into the ground, having that extra weight, and walking out in nature. So yes, I'm gonna call on Joanne.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne Bagshaw, and I'm a 2005 graduate of the 4-year program at the Institute. I've been a therapist for, I think, 25 years now, maybe a little bit more. And originally, I was a trauma therapist, and I integrated core energetics into that work. And then about 7-ish years ago, I respecialized to be a sex therapist. And then in 2020, when everyone was looking for therapy and I had an extremely long wait list, I branched out to a group practice. I hired a couple of people, about to hire a third person. And this is all very remarkable to me because it was never my goal or plan to own a group therapy practice. In fact, if someone would have told me I was going to do this, I would have laughed in their face because I thought I would have hated it. And I don't actually. I really love it. Besides that, I'm also a professor of psychology at our local community college, and getting close to retirement on that end. My favorite grounding practices are also the body scan and diaphragmatic breathing. And I also love the I'm here aspect, especially if I'm standing and connecting my heels to the ground. And I think Tristan is next.
Thank you, Joanne. Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you, and I recognize some faces here, and those that I don't know, welcome. It's good to see you. My name is Tristan Avery, and I graduated core in 2016. And I think I did the 4-year program. I didn't do year 5. And then I interned in 2018. had a full year of that, which was really, really enjoyable and wonderful. And I think I interned for a couple of specific weekends after that. In addition to that, I have a wonderful, thriving, diverse private practice right now that I really love. And I assist and co-facilitate and teach for the Living Core program with Aiden Fisher in Montreal. And I've been doing that for 3 years. And I adore it. I adore it. I leave in a couple of weeks for a full week-long retreat there that I'm looking forward to. And my practice is wide and diverse, and I have a lot of wonderful people that I work with. And what I have found recently that really calls to my heart in a unique way is working with the LGBTQ plus community. And even within that, the trans community. My heart is just really called to work with them. And I have quite a few trans clients, at the moment, trans masculine. And that's what I'll be sharing with you all tonight. My experience with that. And my favorite grounding exercise is before I go into session, I like to sit quietly and meditate and breathe and ask for guidance and just really connect with my heart the best that I can ahead of each session. So that's me.
Thank you, Tristan. So to expand just a little bit more, I know you all briefly touched on your work in the world, but I'm wondering if you could expand on it a little bit more and tell us more specifically about the work, how it shows up, like the format. I know some of you mentioned, therapy practice, group coaching, but if you can just expand more on your work and how it either intersects with core, maybe it does, maybe you're just a good old core energetics practitioner, and that's good. Just if you could speak to that, or maybe how your work it was influenced by core. So if you can just speak to that, and expanding your work in the world and how it may or intersect with core, and the format that you're currently using. Isha, would you like to start us off?
Sure, thank you. So it was actually while I was in my core training between 2014 and 2018 that I began sort of exploring how my personality style or my character style was showing up in my relationship with money. And, around the time COVID hit, I began the divorce process, and I started to explore this concept more deeply and found that there are, right, like as we relate to one thing, we relate to everything. And I started to see how I was giving my power away by not being financially literate and all of those things. And so that led me down through this money healing journey. Prior to that, I was, working with entrepreneurs and doing business coaching and that kind of thing. And that just kind of steered me a little bit. I was still in the entrepreneurial space and working with entrepreneurs, but it was just more heavily focused on money. And really on the using those 5 character styles to really help people understand some of the unconscious aspects of their relationship with money. And I call them money archetypes, which helps people understand it a little bit more easily. And I help people connect to sensations in their body and maybe even ancestral patterns that might be showing up in their relationship with money. And we clear all those when we talk about epigenetics. We talk about expanding the money nervous system, expanding your capacity to receive. And yeah, I help people, with embodiment exercises and release practices. I help them let go of the old stories and really input, right? Insert more empowered perspectives, especially around people feel a lot of shame around money. There's scarcity stories, and as we know with epigenetics, our ancestors have experienced real experience of scarcity that still live in our bodies. And so really exploring those stories that show up in the present tense, right? But that don't have context, right? There's decontextualized trauma. So that's part of the work that I do.
Beautiful. I can really appreciate that, like, you know, what we carry from our history. I think that's wonderful. Thanks, Isha. Joanne?
Hi, so I use a variety of different techniques and modalities in my practice. I've always been an eclectic therapist, but I have to admit that core energetics really does still have a profound influence in the way that I work with clients. And I think here's an example of how it shows up for me in couples work, which, as I describe it to you, it will be just like, yeah, of course, a no-brainer. But if you think about from somebody who's traditionally trained in therapy, the idea of when I'm working with a couple is asking them to stand up and do the work, our work facing each other and not sitting on a couch telling me about each other. That's a big shift. And when I supervise new therapists and work with my associates, it's really scary for them to think about the idea of pulling a couple off the couch. Let's get them standing. Let's get them facing each other. Let's get them doing some movement. And while I'm not doing traditional mask, lower self, higher self work, or, you know, harder techniques like hitting necessarily, you know, we're playing with energy. And the other thing that really how core impacts my work is, as a therapist, I think that my strength is really helping people to see the patterns in their lives and really understand the character structures and how that shows up in people's bodies and also in their languaging really helps me hone in on what the core issue is and wound is when someone comes in and they're describing their pattern. And it really helps to move the work in a quick pace. And I've got them up and it's different for them, you know, and this is like, oh, this is really wild, you know. To core energetics therapists is not, and this is pretty mild, but to somebody who's used to traditional therapy, it's powerful. It's really powerful, and it gets them into their feelings and into their vulnerability with their partner, rather than just coming in and arguing about sex, which is maybe what they thought they were going to do. Valerie.
Well, and I guess just to start off, in running my organization and being the executive and artistic director of a not-for-profit, working with many people, from my dancers to teaching artists to my administrators to collaborators to renters. Like, it's an endless amount of people. So I have to use all my skills to basically navigate that and be a better leader. So that's sort of overarching. But what brought me to this work was a workshop called Skimming the Surface that I've been doing since 2013. And it grew out of a dance that I made that I realized was about trauma, and it came out of me. And I received this message that I was supposed to do it for women who have experienced trauma, the dance, and then a workshop and have a discussion. So I was doing that for a couple of years very successfully, and I was excited about it and felt like I was onto something. But I realized I was working with some pretty intense populations that I didn't know the mind, and I knew the container of the body. So that's sort of what brought me to core energetics, is to support that work, because I'm going to Rikers Island, I'm going to psych wards, homeless shelters, halfway houses, work release programs, other people. So I needed to know about the mind. So although that workshop is not a core energetics workshop, it's a molding of my 30 years of professional experience as a choreographer and movement educator into creating and crafting these very unique guided movement experience journeys that are very targeted to go through many places and have an end result of a lot of moving of energy and releasing and new insights and tools. So I find that this work has really supported that. I'm also seeing people one-on-one, and I have a process group called the Somatic Healing Group, which is happening in my studio in Queens. And what's exciting about that is it's brought this work to completely new people. Only one has done core before, and we'll be going into a 5th cohort in the fall. And I think that's really exciting, is to just bring it out into the world, and advertising it in the dance world and the movement world, as everybody needs it, but dancers could certainly use it. So I feel like I'm bringing it to new communities all over inside the New York City scape. So let's see, Tristan.
Thanks, Valerie. So what I feel like I want to speak to first is that as the LGBTQ community started becoming my clients, and specifically the trans community, trans men, I became aware of the compound and complex layers of wounding and trauma that are in our community. And I identify as gay, so I know it through the lens of being a gay man. And the trans community is very unique. I'm discovering in what it how it's been wounded and what they wrestle with in life. And as I was working with them, I first want to say that my belief is that the trans community is a gift to this world to challenge us around our concept of masculine, feminine, social structures in the world, that and it all relates, I think, to toxic masculinity. And so I pay attention as I'm working with them as to where they're blocked in their body. And I find that most of my LGBTQ plus clients are really restricted in their throats and pelvis, because they're either their gender identity or their sexual identity has been so wounded and judged, criticized, rejected, abandoned, and not held. And there are very unique things about the trans community that, even being a gay man, I don't understand. And one of the things that I really want to do in my practice as a whole is be in my heart and see how I can be as empathetic and understanding about what they might be experiencing, even though I don't have the experience of knowing what it's like not to be in my correct body, like male or female. I don't have that understanding, but I ask a lot of questions. And I find that often these particular clients are more resistant to moving because they've been so silenced. It's threatening and dangerous for them to do that. So I try to create a space to make it possible for them to even to consider bringing themselves forward, right? And I help them by offering, like, what do you think the gifts are that you offer as a being in your own right, no matter what your identity or sexual identity is? Like, what is your gift of being here, right? What is your internal purpose? And then, like, what might your soul have done by coming here to be here at this time, offering these gifts and going through this experience? And I find that really profound. And I think in one of the later questions down the road, I'll speak to how some of that is manifested in both personal work and in group work. This place of how the LGBT community might be more resistant to even opening or expressing themselves to others. So yeah, so that's kind of what drew me into it. And the more I worked with them, the more I just felt my heart open and really wanted to be available to them, to support them in knowing how amazing they are. I'll leave it with that. And I think that brings us to Teresa.
Thank you, Tristan. I'm inspired by everything I'm hearing each of you say you do and how you do the work. I came to CORE because I got divorced in the late 80s. And I thought to myself, this was a perfectly good guy. Like, why did I feel inclined to throw him away? And I wanted to find a way to figure myself out around that question. And I was talking to my secretary, who was in Barbara Brennan's healing program. Some of you may know that program. And so as a part of that, those folks were required to see a core therapist to do their work, to do their healing work. And she recommended that I begin seeing Karen Wilner. And after seeing Karen Wilner for a few years, one day she said to me, I think you would do great as a core practitioner. So we talked about it, and I really didn't go to the training to become a practitioner. I went to the training because I needed to do the work on myself. And so that's what I did. And for me, that is the biggest part of how I use the training, is I use it on myself to help me clear the stuff that gets stuck, to help me see my patterns better and better, and release those that are really problematic and in the way. So I use core on me constantly. I pay attention to my body and my feelings that come up. And for my organizational clients, who are mostly senior executives in corporations, I have an expression I use with them, which is, your body is a barometer. And the idea there is, it's like an easy, handy, scientific, not psychological sounding way of helping them to tune in to their feelings, so that as senior leaders who have charge over the lives and well-being of many, many people, they can show up as cleaner, healthier instruments in leading and doing their work. So, I mean, that's a bit of how I use core. Sometimes I do something with a client, like helping them to breathe and connect, to feel if they're nervous in a presentation. Beforehand, as we're preparing, I talk about, feeling your back against the chair and your butt on the chair and your feet on the floor, and feeling the backs of your thighs supported by the chair, and just breathe. And those small techniques help them. I mean, they feel like they're magical. As I think we all do when we're learning those techniques and experience the simplicity of them, and yet the very profound impact they can have in lessening anxiety, in helping us to slow our pace, and just helping us also to feel our feelings. So my challenge has been using it to help me to be a clearer instrument in the work that I do in the world, and then to bring the techniques to my clients in small ways. I would also say, because we learn about energy and how to see, and I always feel like it's to see and experience energy, to feel the energy. I can feel the energy of the individual, and you can too, of course, and the energy of the system. And because I value that as real data, then when I talk about the energy of the system and I use those words with my clients, soon they get to understand it. And then soon they begin talking about the energy of the system. And we talk about things they can do to shift the energy in a meeting, or to shift the energy in a conversation. And the techniques that I teach them are core. Joanne, you talked about getting people to stand up and face each other for a conversation. And maybe I would say, okay, let's just have a quick stand-up meeting, 2 minutes. This is the topic. And whatever the tension is in the room, that's the topic. And it's stand up, talk about it. Okay, what did we get from that? So that's a bit about how I use the work in the world.
So inspiring, all of you, really, how you use the work. And I think what I'm really feeling too is how we use the work on ourselves, and we share it with the people who come to us. So, and just the simple little things that can make such a huge difference. in people's lives, just like having them stand up, right? Yeah, so beautiful. I would love to move on to our next question. And you all talked about what you're doing in the world, but I'm wondering if you can, for the people who are participating, if perhaps you could pick a case study or present us with an example of how you helped create transformation in either a specific client, maybe in your community, a work environment or workplace, or what in your field of practice. And if you could take maybe 2 to 3 minutes, maybe to give us that case study, that would be great. Tristan, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So what comes to mind and heart here is I was facilitating a large group, and the topic was on sex and sexuality and expression. And people were sharing in the group about their experiences around sex and being really free about it and being able to talk about it and being open about it. And everyone was going, it was a large group, and I was going around the room. And when everyone had gone, I had noticed that I had been silent, and the other person that identified as gay in the room had been silent, and no one had spoken to anything that had anything to do about LGBTQ. And I was feeling crushed. Even as a facilitator, I'm sitting there going, wow. And so I spoke about it, and I started crying. And I said, I checked in with the other person, and they started crying. And I went to them, and a process started, a big process. And the group, a lot of the group, it's diverse, but identifies mostly as heterosexual. And there might have been a few people that bisexual or they, them, non-binary. And some of the things that were said in the open group, unbeknownst to them, was actually kind of offensive around some of, like, to LGBTQ community. And so I invited this person to share some things. And what I ended up offering was inviting some of the men who identified as heterosexual in the room to come and ask if they'd be willing to stand with this gay man. And he was crying and was sharing a lot. And I said, would you guys just be willing to pick him up? And the second that I invited them to pick him up, he just wept. And what I said to him is, can you see how you're a bridge to the heterosexual community? And men of heart who identify as heterosexual, can you see how you are a bridge to healing for this man? And when that was going on, the room kind of fell apart, and women started coming over and crying and weeping because they longed for men to be in their heart. And this is what I mean, that I think wounding in the LGBTQ plus community is really around toxic masculinity. And I think there's some religious sexual trauma that we all experience, right? That's in there as well. And so it became this process where they were able to grieve together. The man who had been wounded or abused by men who were fearful heterosexuals around their own softness or their own heart, and the men that longed to be in their heart. And so that was a powerful experience for me. And I ended up inviting a lot of movement. A lot of people went into rage. A lot of people went into fear. And so there was a lot of pelvic work, and there was a lot of nurturing in that particular moment. And I was blessed to be a part of it. And I cried and wept as well. And I think it was a way to bring this group together. So that's one of my aspirations, is to create groups to facilitate this bridge where we can heal each other around this trauma and wounding of our heart and our sexuality. I'll leave it there.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tristan. Joanne, would you like to jump in?
Sure. The short case that I'll share involves a group that I was running at the time for women who had sexual violence in their background. And one of the members of the group, who was a young woman in college, who had child sexual abuse in her background, was sharing that at her work, her manager kept asking her out on dates. And it was, she was not interested. It was upsetting to her, felt violating to her. But her way of handling it was to be in sort of the good girl mask and just giggle and not say no, not say yes, not say anything, just giggle. So he, which is a good example of toxic masculinity, just took that as a yes to keep asking, right? So in our group, I invited her to first express in the group as if each group member was representing the manager to each of us, who expressed her lower self. What would she really want to say to him? So things like, you're too old, you're unattractive, so she was able to, release that and then access her power, her higher self, right? Her empowered self, and practice what she wanted to really say, which was, I don't date anyone I work with. And to be able to find that authentic voice and power. And she went to each one of us. And we, at this point, we're having fun and we're trying to, hey, baby her, and and she had to without giggling. She had to do it without giggling, right? And to say, no matter what we did, I don't date anyone I work with. I'm not interested. And she did it. And it was really, really powerful.
The mask of giggling. How many of us out there have put on that mask?
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Thank you, Joanne.
Sure. Teresa?
Thanks, Joanne. I was thinking about my granddaughter, who is 18 months old. And one of the things that I've been able to practice with her is slowing down my breathing when she's upset. And if I can get her near me, I just really consciously slow down my breathing and she calms down. I was surprised. It was an experiment, but it was one that worked. The other thing that I'll mention, or another thing I'll mention, is as chair of the board, one of the skills that I ask our board to practice, and it was especially true when the board was made up predominantly of core energetics practitioners and teachers. That's changed. We now have a board that's more diverse in terms of background and experience. But back then, I asked people to practice containment, which is a core skill, so that they did not bring their personal work with each other or anything that flared in the moment even into board work, because board meetings are finite in terms of time, and we're there for a very specific purpose, and that is to be responsible for the governance of the Institute. And so that was a thing that I requested and people lived into, and I'm grateful for that because it helped us to get our work done more efficiently. And then the other piece I'll share, and it is around abuse, is this is a fairly senior leader who's new to a company's culture, and a woman, a Black woman, and she's in an industry where women and Blacks have not generally been welcomed at any level, especially in higher level roles. And so the culture is really abusing her and rejecting her. And people are taking sides against her. They're kind of building like this buddy negative environment that she's in. And so yesterday when we were speaking, she was holding a lot because she just had a very difficult conversation with a peer who said some very nasty things. And I made space for her literally by using what I was experiencing in my body as she talked, I shared with her and talked about the sadness that I felt and how I felt like I was choking and how I felt like I wanted to scream and run out of the room, and how I felt like I wanted to punch the person. And so it gave her, let's say, legitimized, I think that's a better word, it legitimized for her right to feel as she did about it and to express herself about it. And she had a good long cry. And by the end of our conversation, she was able to say, oh my God, I feel so much better having gotten that out, because it was in her body and stuck. And I think there's more to get out, but that was a great start.
I'm really appreciating, sorry to step in, I'm really appreciating that you spoke to sharing your feelings, which I think is one of the unique things about CORE. There are moments where you can share of yourself as a practitioner in a way that's in service to who you're working with. And it's really, really beautiful to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, it truly is. So in all honesty, I've lost track. Valerie, did you answer the question?
No, okay.
So I think it's, yeah.
So I'd say most of the people that work with me are people that enjoy moving or don't move at all. So they like that I'm coming from the movement background, or they need to get in their bodies, is often the case for one-on-one situations. So with this client, she was a dance student and doing my Skimming the Surface workshop, and then became a one-on-one client. And she had a sister that became diagnosed as schizophrenic when she was in her early teens. And so that whole, her childhood shifted greatly because the parents were tending to the sibling, and she was really lost in being seen by the parents, and also started to develop the identity as a caregiver. From a very early age, continuing into her adult life, she's in her 60s. And she's all in some ways like enabled the sibling to become more dependent on her, and it's enmeshed into this identity she has. She didn't have any boundaries with her sister, couldn't say no, it's a family member. She was like severely energetically collapsed and fatigued at all times. But really, wanting to be in her body and have the desire to, but just was really lost in being able to like activate anything on the situation. So it was a very long process because the story just, would keep going, the story. So over time, she learned to understand, the effects of the loss of her parents' nurturing and how that affected her in her various parts, to understand and heal those pieces that were missing of her parents' presence. She developed boundaries with her sister, and finding ways to take care of herself, because it was always taking care of everybody else but her, mainly her sister. And she, so caring for herself more. An important thing was seeing the gifts that she had in her role as the caregiver, that there was a lot of beautiful things that she had to offer, but there was a very enmeshed in this identity. And she basically had to learn, is learning who she is outside of this role, and how does she even exist if she isn't caring for her sister. It's like she doesn't even know who she is. So working on that. So over time, she's been able to understand all these things, developed boundaries, staying separate from her sister, being able to put her away at times and not, consume her, finding more peace and understanding, self-care. And, all of this was done with she needed a lot of movement to stay in her body, because just, so collapsed, but the movement, is how I met her a long time ago. And it's a very long relationship. So she's doing much better and is kind of aware of all these things she's learned and is growing. And it's kind of very like specific case that has had, a trajectory to move through in her finding herself and her own self-care. So, thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Isha, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was in one. So this past year, I worked with someone who had been working a job, and she'd been sort of had some entrepreneurial work going on. She had like a membership community on the side, and she'd really not been able to develop it because her job, her 9 to 5, had become so consuming. And so before I began working with her, she quit her job. And she got pretty deeply in debt after quitting her job. And she was experiencing a lot of shame and avoidance about her financial situation. And she knew that it was deeper than just the numbers, right? She is also the daughter of a financial advisor. And so, there was a lot of energy between her and her father. So when she started working with me, she had sort of this narrowed vision about what she could accomplish in her life, how she could move forward from where she was right now, how she could get to where she wanted to go. And she was hiding her financial reality from her father, who was, she described him as sort of like, the guy that comes in and rescues and takes care of all the things, right? She was afraid of disappointing him and having him disapprove of her. And over the course of just a few sessions, because she was already, she was being a healer herself, she worked very, very quickly. And we explored how she might have created this dynamic unconsciously in which she was this naughty child doing things wrong, right? She was afraid of disappointing him, but, in fact, there was a part of her that was rebelling, and it was this indirect way of asserting herself and of doing things her own way, but at some point also at her own expense. And so the way I like to do unconscious work or shadow work is to bring a lot of humor in it. So most of the time in the sessions, when we discover like there is this part of her that has created this situation, we're just exploding in laughter because it can be so ridiculous and ironic sometimes. So that was very liberating for her to understand that there was this part of her that it was asserting herself. And when we tapped into that part, she began to sort of like, okay, well, let's give that part a voice. What would that voice say to your father? What would that voice say to your clients or to your prospective clients? And so she really started practicing being this, this sassy, rebellious part of herself, which was underneath the mask of goodness, right? So we just threw away that mask. We're like, okay, the rebel's here. And I also did a financial plan for her. And that allowed another set of eyes on her debt, which was very, very powerful because it's been a secret. And so there was a lot of release happening as we were crunching her numbers. There was a lot of layers of shame that were also being shed, and she was able to own her responsibility in it. And by accepting her responsibility, she was able to like, okay, I can implement this plan. I gave her several options and she decided on a plan. She feels really awesome moving forward on it. And she also experienced like miraculously this level of neutrality when she released the shame. Like it was just numbers. It was just numbers. Numbers can be moved this way, allocated that way. And it was just a lot cleaner for her system instead of having all this charge. Yeah, so that's basically, she was able to again implement the plan and begin to shift out of where she was into where she wanted to be. So that was very, very gratifying to both of us.
Yeah, super powerful. Wow, what a story. That's so great. I would love to take a moment here because the panelists has been speaking quite a lot and giving us a lot of information. And I'm wondering if if people out in the audience have any questions that they want to ask to the particular panelist or a general question, you can feel free to raise your hand, put it in the chat. I'll give space for a few minutes for that. Okay. Laura.
Lorraine and Marion.
Okay, you want to bring one up first?
Sure. Lorraine, I can, if you can unmute yourself and turn your video on, then I'm able to bring you up.
Can I not turn my video on? I have a
Sure,
mic.
we can just hear you, yeah.
Yeah, my head's really bad. My question is, it's to anyone who wants to answer it, is how do you move into an area of specialism?
I'm happy to share. What comes to mind is the specialty is present in a way in our own like essence. So for me, like I said, I came in as a professional dancer and movement educator for like 25 years before I started Core Energetics. So my skills as a choreographer, as a director, being creative, being intuitive, all these things were underneath me. And so putting that inside the core work is very exciting. And it's sort of, it's clear to me that that's where my specialty is. That's where my gifts are, is working with the body and the creativity surrounding the experientials surrounding that. So I feel like it's something that will present itself clearly, and where your specialty is and your gift is, I feel like it's not something we can force, but it just is part of our essence. So I hope that helps. That's my experience.
Thank you.
And I'd like to just add maybe that the way I knew it was, it hit my heart really strongly. I was just paying attention and kind of discovered that way that there was a calling within me. It's just something that I knew, and I followed that. That's kind of a simple, but that's what it was for me.
Share as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it was emergent for me in, in sort of uncovering my own journey, and then seeing it in other people, and seeing people struggling with it as well. And like, there's a need, right? And wanting to respond to the need, and feeling very passionate about, like, sometimes we think we're going to specialize this way, right? We're going to go down this path, and then life happens to us, and we're sort of steered in a different direction. I would have never thought that I would be working with money 10 years ago. So it was just like, yep, this is divinely guided, and you keep sort of following the breadcrumbs, and it just, if you allow yourself to be guided, you will get to the specialty eventually.
Good advice.
I could
I
add.
think, oh, go ahead. You go, Teresa.
Just a quick add. I think for me, it's just layering core on to me and to my life, and to me and my work. So I didn't develop a new specialty. I just I bring it into everything I do. Joanne?
I think my answer is kind of similar in that my specialties sort of changed according to where I was and what I needed. So I was a trauma therapist for a long time, healing my own trauma. And then I wanted to do something lighter and more fun. So sex therapy sounded good. Also, I'm an adoptee, and I didn't mention this really earlier, but I also work with adoptees. But that wasn't work that I could do until I healed a lot of that trauma around adoption, and was in my own reunions. Like, I could not work with clients who were in reunions if I didn't already do that. Like, I knew my emotional limitations for that. So, that's another specialty. So it's always sort of like, where am I? What's, as Tristan said, like, what's the pull in your heart, and what do I need right now? What can I offer? And it changes, and it should change, because this is what keeps us, keeps our careers long, and keeps us from being burnt out, that we get excited about something. And if you completed your work in an area, that you can move on and try something else using all of the training that you already have and adding on to that.
Thank you. Do you
Mary,
want,
did you want to come with your question? You just need to unmute.
Oh, were you addressing me?
Yes, I didn't know if you still had your question.
Oh, yes, I didn't know. I didn't hear you say that. Hi, my name is Marion Lewis, as you can see. And if I ask every question I'd like to ask, it would take up the whole hour because I'm so inspired by this, what you've all shared, and that the Core Institute still is thriving. I'm just so thrilled. So I came into Core when it was bioenergetics with John P. and Al Lowen, and then it became Core Energetics, and I had been a member of the Pathwork, so I'm a Pathwork helper. And so I didn't become certified in Core. I did my 3 years that I had to do to be my Pathwork helper, and then went on to many, many other modalities, including EFT tapping and therapeutic touch and all kinds of other modalities. But that energy work, the foundation in the core work, is just so vital for people to know about and for parents to raise children. I used to come to the open board meetings every year before COVID and say, when are you going to start a family institute? When are you going to start training parents how to raise children? So I've always been like a promoter of that. And so I'll ask a main question at the very end. I'll just make that statement first. So I had my practice over 30 years. I'm now down to one client who lives in another, I'm in New York City, who's in another city, and coming to closure with her and finding thinking maybe she could work with a core energetic therapist out there. So I've been, finding names of people, because when she lived here, we had the energy work. And now on the phone, we always have to have something, even if it's an expression or whatever, get grounded while you're on the phone, whatever we do. So as I say, and I'll ask this question first. Could I write out a lot of my questions and send them to you? I wrote down everybody's names. So
yeah, Marion, that would be great. If maybe you could find one question that you could,
yes,
they could answer now, and then we can.
I will.
Follow up
So would I address that to you, Teresa?
You can address it to the panel or to a specific person to answer the question.
No, I mean, when I send my letter, I'm going to send a letter.
Yes, you can send it to me and I'll make sure.
You'll spread it around. Okay. So I'll focus it down to one area that is so big in my heart, and that is our youth. And that our youth, especially the 10-year to 24-year-olds, the main way of death is suicide. And so we need so much more support in this society for our young people and how parents raise children to deal with their energy, their sexual energy, and what is anything being addressed about this in the Core Institute.
Amazing.
Okay, so this is more of a question for the Institute of Core Energetics versus.
Yes, and what you're planning and what you see.
So we'd love to answer.
You can't do everything, but I thought our youth and how children are raised and parents trained to raise children so that they're not going out in the world and don't have the support they need and would kill themselves rather than, going on. What you might be there talking about or putting in motion or something.
Yeah. I was hoping that for a question for specific panelists. This is kind of outside of the realm of what we're speaking of, but I think you have an important question and I'd love to answer that. And I'm just hoping that I could answer that offline separately.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I can save that. I can save that for my letter. So I didn't have any specific questions because I think you're all just marvelous. And so I'll make my list and I'll do my work. So thank you very much.
Thanks you so much. It's just in the interest of time because we have more questions to get through.
Right. So I'll exit.
All right. Thank you. I think there's one more hand raised.
Oren.
Good evening, everyone. I have a question for Teresa that I think I have a sense of, but I would love to hear you talk a little bit about the extent to which, like, it sounds like the folks that you work with may sign up to work with you as an executive coach. And I don't know how much they're aware of how, if core, because some of the things that you could do, you could share. And I'm wondering, how much do they know that they're signing up for some work that might be core? And I think Joanne maybe as well, I'm not sure, maybe it's a bit more. I feel like for a therapist, someone who's in traditional therapy, some of these things, while unorthodox for them, might be closer to what they kind of signed up for. I feel like with business coaching, professional coaching, executive coaching, it may or may not be expected. And I'm wondering how much you kind of articulate that as a part of what you are offering. And I'm thinking, especially as someone who might be early in signing up with you, how much that is stated.
So I'd never make a big deal of it. I don't sell it as a feature of my work. What I say is that we do experiments from time to time, and the experiments sometimes will involve you taking a breath. We might sit quietly and meditate. I downplay it. I don't talk about it as core because I'm really not there to do therapy with them, although the work is therapeutic. And as core practitioners, unless you are a licensed therapist, we learn to be practitioners of energy work. And so that's really what I'm doing. And sometimes people recognize it and they say, oh, I think I read something about this. Is this blah, 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 blah? And I say, yeah, it is. And we talk. But if they don't know what it is, and what I'm doing is helpful and not harmful, and I always ask, would you be willing to experiment with an idea that I have? So, Corin, that's how I do it.
And I said it to Teresa, but I made an assumption there. If anyone else has input, I'd be happy to hear from different perspectives. Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
Well,
I'll share.
Okay.
Oh,
Sorry, I was
sorry.
going to say in the interest of time, I might need to move on, but I'll let you answer the question and then we'll move on.
Okay. So I just say briefly on my bio, my website, the different modalities that I use, but because I'm a sex therapist, I do have something in the informed consent that says, we may use somatic techniques, but sex therapy never involves sex. And I have to say that because we get men with, compulsive sexual behavior. So, I have to put that in there. But in session, just like Teresa, I don't make a big deal out of it either. And I say the same thing. Are you willing to try and exercise with me? Are you willing to experiment with something? And I don't go into this is core energetic, blah, 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 unless the client wants to know more, unless that comes up. So it's not really a big deal.
Hey, Joanne, I love that. Are you willing to try something or experiment with me? That's really valuable information. Thank you.
Well, it's better than saying, do you want to? Because the answer is no.
Yes. Yeah, it's an invitation, right? So, yeah. Beautiful. Okay. Do we have any more questions in the chat, Lindsay?
No.
Okay. So I think just in the interest of time, I'm going to move us forward as it is 8:15. So I want to ask our panelists another question. And this question has it's a couple questions within the question. But the first part of the question is, how do you see core energetics contributing to the evolution of your field in particular? Or how is it that your field is able, like how you're able to really move the dial forward on your own work because of core energetics? Like, so you can answer that question in that context. And then perhaps, what are some of the challenges you face? At least just name one challenge. And also the last part of the question would be and I'll help you through these if you forget. What is like your wildest vision or dream of what's possible in your particular area of work, of what you do in the world? So I'll just let the question sit for a second, and whoever feels ready to answer the question first, if you can please just unmute yourself.
I'll go ahead and answer. Particularly in the field of sex therapy, which historically was pretty solution focused and CBT focused, which is not the way I practice. But I think that core energetics really helps to bring the whole person into the room and really aids in that systemic lens of looking, working with a problem and how to work with it systemically. Just a big reminder that there's a body in the room, right? A whole person, a whole body, a whole system.
And then the second and third parts of that question, what are some of the challenges you face, and what is your vision or dream of what could be possible for this work in this particular area?
Yeah, challenges would always be explaining core energetics, which is why I just do it. And then the other is real practical and finding space to rent that one can move and make noise and freely. I think that it's a universal issue for anybody doing core energetics, right? And then the last, what is your wildest dream of what's possible? I think this is just really practical, but I would really, really love to be able to talk to another therapist about character structures and have them know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I relate to that. Thanks, Joanne.
Sure.
Go next. I feel like core energetics brings so much more depth and nuance to the field of money healing, moving way beyond money mindset, right? That's been it's a term that is kind of thrown out there, and I became sort of frustrated with the whole money mindset movement when I was part of this community from an online entrepreneur that was quite famous in wealth work. And I had the opportunity to meet with some people inside of that community and do like free sessions. And I found that what often kept people stuck was some of those deeper developmental and relational patterns that we address in core commonly, like, often. And so, yeah, like some of the challenges, people tend to kind of want to steer away from that. They don't always want to go into those places, right? Because they can be scary and they can be, unfamiliar. And it's easier for a lot of people to chase sort of the bigger money promises that you often see sort of in coaching and in wealth workers or money coaches. And so, yeah, sometimes like communicating the value of doing this work goes beyond money, right? It's like when you open up money, you're talking about energy, you're talking about talking about decolonizing money from the system that it exists in, right? How it's used and how it's wielded in the world. And my wildest vision for what's possible with my work is really about moving more money into the hands of people that are going to do something with it, that are gonna who have goals for that money that extends beyond themselves, that isn't just about creating comfort and a lifestyle for themselves, but are really about a bigger collective vision for that money, about overflow. And what do you do with the overflow? How do you steward that money in responsible ways, in healing ways? And that's, I want to work with people who really have that bigger vision for their personal work.
Love that. Wow. So good.
I can go. Guess my wildest dream is to continue to take this skimming the surface workshop to more people. And I've been doing some retreats with it and then blending in like a process group inside a weekend after there's the container built. So bringing that to more people, because I found in all these years of offering it, it was inside these closed containers with these partner not-for-profit social service organizations. And I started to open them up to just, people not in those situations. And there's a lot of, need, everybody has their stuff to work on. So it's been exciting to open it up. And because I was working in all those very specific places, I have funding for it. So I'm excited to be able to use this funding to make these offerings free of this workshop to just like people, not on Rikers Island or in a halfway house or some homeless shelter. The difference is like people wanting to do the work. Some people aren't wanting to do the work. I've encountered all sorts of things on the journey of that workshop. Doing the process group work really is exciting for me, and bringing in my dance background and my creativity and a studio of all kinds of fun props and toys and things to bring into processes. It's very interesting to me to take all of my background and, this is inside a professional dance company, not for profit, but I'm like made another tributary of channeling my background into this other area, which is very exciting, and it's underneath my dance company. And then I have to say what is really dialed up is the investigation into my choreography. I feel like for many, many years, my choreography was bringing out the things that I couldn't find in myself in words. And now, since in doing my healing, it's transcending into going to the deeper psychological, delicate places of my performers and dancers, and making pieces that are carefully going into these spaces. My newest work was with 6 men, and it was a ritual and a ceremony through movement, and it was beautiful to see, all these different, masculinity, vulnerability, all these different emotions coming up. So it's interesting to see how I'm taking just deep investigations into the creation of movement and choreography, and having it not, like going to my own deep places to cultivate it, but also that of others as well in this sort of group investigation. So that is, another, making work for a very long time. So, what is there new to say? So this feels new, a new investigation. I would say the challenge for me is because I'm working with so many people underneath and inside my not-for-profit, is to see certain things in people, dynamics, the character structures, or, all these things that go on, and not be someone's therapist to be able to necessarily do something about it. The amount of projection or blame when, people don't want to be, or can't see how they're showing up. So it gets a little bit tricky to navigate having this knowledge, and knowing how I can carefully, I guess, be inside these relationships and I guess maneuver them, but not be someone's therapist. I feel like it's tricky to see a lot, but not be able to go there with it, if that makes sense. I could see a lot and I'd say it's not my job in that moment. That's not the role. So I feel like that's a challenge that I just have to sit with.
Thanks, Valerie. Kristen or Teresa, I think.
Oh, I think I could speak to, you know, being a practitioner and having, working with the LGBTQ plus community within that, not something that's external that I'm bringing core energetics into. What I really appreciate is the place of the language of core energetics and how I invite and work with my clients to um, really make conscious, like how they had to be able, how they had to meet life, like what happened to them when they were younger, what they were exposed to, and the choices that they made to be able to survive, right? And creating a space that's affirming and empowering for them, and helping them understand that the choices they made were to be able to survive. Um, I think that one of the things that I find uh, it's not just the body work. And again, as I said earlier, um, some of my clients in this community are really resistant to expressing themselves and bringing themselves forward. Some of them have felt very invisible, so it could feel really dangerous for them to speak up. So part of my goal is to help them find that voice and really bring themselves forward. A challenge for me, I think, is that because I'm a part of the community, sometimes when clients come in and bring in things, I end up being very aware of my own feelings and how I've experienced similar things. It would be a way to kind of maybe say that differently. It was like, if I was terrified during COVID and my clients were coming in terrified with COVID and I was still carrying my own amount of fear, I had to really work hard with where I put what I was experiencing emotionally. And that happens with some of the things that people come in saying about the abuse that they've suffered because of their sexual orientation or identity. And I know that place really well. So how do I hold space for them in that moment where some of the stuff is so powerful, I can't help but feel some of my own experience. And I've been able to really do a pretty good job with that so far. And again, my vision, I think, is to, I use the word bridge, and to work with not just the LGBTQ plus community, but to work with them alongside those that identify as heterosexual, non-binary, just all orientations, to see where we could bridge the gap and what we have to offer each other and what we're doing in our expansion as a race of people through these expressions that we have. And to celebrate sexuality, to really empower them to really feel the beauty of their identity, of their journey, like an emphasis on what are the gifts within this, right? That you're stepping into. I'm expanding in that particular way. So that's my goal, is to create those connections, because I think there's a lot that they can offer each other in different ways. It means a lot to me.
Mm. Thank you, Tristan.
One of my wishes, and I think the Institute is onto this as a next phase of its work, is to bring core energetics to leaders, people who have charge over the daily lives and well-being in so many ways, physically, emotionally, financially, of many, many, many people. And with more consciousness, I think leaders would do a better job and systems would be healthier. So I know that that's one of the things the Institute is looking at doing. I'm glad for that. And the challenge is how to talk about it in a way that makes it safe and not threatening, and not like they're going to be in therapy, because that won't work for most of them who would end up going through these programs with people who are in their system. So it's like, how do you make it safe is a challenge. In terms of my wildest dream, I am at a place where I don't think I've ever said this publicly before, where I have no ambition. Like, I am not striving for anything. And I have been a striver all of my life, but I'm not striving now. And it's really weird to be in that spot. And I would also have to say that I'm loving it and I'm laughing at myself sometimes because it's like, well, what am I supposed to be doing now? I mean, because I've always been busy and here I am. But I do have a wild dream for the Institute. And that is that we would attract to the Institute and to the training, whether it's 2 years or 4 years, more and more people, diverse people, diverse in terms of, you know, how they would use the work like we're talking about here tonight, what they would gain from it. And I think we have to look to ourselves, all of us who are gathered here, to tell people we know about the training and about the benefits and get them to come. Even if they come and experience an intro weekend, get them to come. And maybe they'll come and say they want to sign up for the 2 years. We're talking about how great it was for us. Can we find other people to share that message with and help this dream for the Institute to become reality? So doors are open for the fall. Tell your folks, tell your folks, because it really is amazing work. I have loved this evening. I really, my co-panelist, I love hearing what you're doing.
Yeah, so inspiring, all the different work in the world and what you're all doing and how you are bringing elements of core. Maybe it's not the whole thing, but elements of core into your work and how it does like help move the dial within your own spheres of influence. And I, you know, I love this conversation about decolonizing money and, you know, the bridge to healing. Tristan, I love that image. So beautiful. Yeah, and I feel like so many of you are doing such amazing work. So I have one more question. I think everyone answered this last question, correct? Yeah. Okay. I have one more question before we're going to reopen up everything for the panelists. But if you could have some words of wisdom that you could either offer a recent graduate or a person who wants to enter your particular field that you're in, or maybe it's just about core in general, but if you have any words of wisdom for our audience that you might want to impart or speak to, that would be great. And
Occurs to me, if I may start us.
Sure, of course.
Is to be bold and follow your inspiration. Because I feel like that's certainly what I did in my career. And I feel that from the panelists here this evening, that's what I was hearing. And for people who do what they love, that's how I hear them say they got to it. They had an inspiration. Looking at it logically, you might not trust that it had any validity whatsoever. But then you go for it and it happens. And it's so satisfying.
Thank you, Teresa.
I would add also that there's no right way to do core, right? You can step out of the box. There is no box, and show up with your unique gifts and try new things. And some of it will take you in a different direction, and that's fine. Just you know, take a risk and see what comes out of it.
I can go similar, just finding where the gift is in yourself and moving forward from that place. Also, just to say that I don't feel like it ends with the graduation, that it's a continual learning and growing, learning about the mind, the body, spiritual practices, how you can keep supporting yourself, supporting the people you work with and clients, and just sort of broadening the learning constantly. I know I have. It's just since graduation, I'm just in all my spare time, I'm just learning, and it's actually very grounding to me to keep doing that. And also just going back to like where the gift is, like with this dance I mentioned, which the dance was about letting go and exorcism of the ego and healing, and included the audience in a ritual in the end. Like this wouldn't have happened if I wasn't a core energetics practitioner and I didn't do my journey. Like I wouldn't have made that work. So I think this comes back to just, you know, taking what is inside you. And I just feel like I know it sounds corny, but I'd like to lead with my heart and keep doing the things that are interesting and that I learn about. And it just keeps guiding me in these ways. And it just feels very organic and not like I'm trying to do something. I'm just doing what I'm excited about and inspired by. And I feel like it unfolds an organic pathway with the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie.
My words of wisdom are like kind of business advice, a little bit maybe of marketing, and sharing what we do, because I feel very passionate about that. This needs to be out in the world more. And sometimes, you know, I made the mistake of using a lot of the language that we had in core, like higher self, lower self, and sometimes that helps people, and sometimes it can get very it's a specific lingo. It doesn't really communicate the value in the way that it could if it just really tapped into people's specific experiences and pain points, frankly, right? Like where they are in their lives and feeling like I don't feel alive. I feel dead around this specific area of my life, right? And that, my other suggestion is like, for somebody who's a generalist now, like pay attention to the particular client and specific area that you love working with, that is just like lights you up. Because I think there's a gift in sort of niching down and getting specific about who you want to work with. A lot of us are multi-passionate, so it's kind of hard to choose because we can do lots of things, right? We can work on sexuality, we can do gender, and we can do all of these different pieces, but it's like where is it that you really feel fulfilled and lit up? That's sort of what I want to like leave people with, is that question.
Thank you, Isha.
I think I'd like to offer that in working with the LGBTQ plus community, whether you are a part of it or not, it's like every person, like I'm a gay man, but I might be working with a gay man who has their own unique experience. And so what I like to offer is to stay really curious about who you're working with, really, really curious. Ask questions. I often, sense into the energy that's in the room. I think that's, really resonated when Teresa used that word around paying attention to the energy. And I think that's important, is to be able to pay attention to energy, but not make an assumption about what the person is experiencing. And it's extraordinary the layers of what the trans community is working with on their journey. And it's so fulfilling to ask questions and to support them in expanding and finding their gifts and their beauty. So I would say ask lots of questions if you don't know, and it's okay not to know. But to really follow, lead by following them, and to let go of an attachment to any particular outcome with them. It's like let them find their way, attune with them and let them find their way. So I knew for me, just because I had a particular experience doesn't mean it was necessarily theirs exactly. And there's a lot of people that are gay in the community who don't understand trans. It's just a reality, right? So this is a place that's opening up in the world, and compassionate curiosity is what I would offer in working with clients that have needs here and come to you with wanting to expand and to really be full within themselves.
Beautiful. Thank you. So I feel I jotted down like the things that stood out for me, what you said, and I just want to repeat them back because I think some of the words were really powerful. I heard take a risk, be bold, find the gift. It's a continuous journey. Share what we do what lights you up. Stay curious, ask questions. Don't make any assumptions, and let go of the attachment to outcome. So thank you for all those amazing words. And now I would like to reopen it up to the attendees, and the floor is open for you to ask your questions. So please come forward, raise your hand, put your question in the chat. These panelists have so much to offer. So I hope that you take this opportunity to really ask your questions, and they have a lot of wisdom to share. So I hope you'll take them up on it. Raise your hand or put it in the chat.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Is there a way I wish the Institute ... in terms of supporting you in what you do? Does anyone have a ... that pops to mind?
Not off the top of my head.
If anything ever pops to mind, send it to Teresa or myself.
Will do.
You know, we're talking a lot at the Institute about, we've postured ourselves inward for so long, bringing people in. You know, part of the evolution of the work is how are we posturing ourselves outward? So bringing the work out. So much like you're doing, how is the Institute supporting it, you know, in and of itself in its own structure doing that, and then also supporting graduates and doing that. And the historical model has been bring the alumni back in, you know, how do we switch that? So it's, yeah, really special to hear about what you're doing and to just brainstorm what that would look like as a system for the Institute.
Yeah, I guess I have just a few thoughts about that. You know, I really love events like this where we get to like, I just feel so rich learning about the specific ways that you work and feeling like, ooh, like corporate leadership or executive leadership and, you know, sex therapy and all of these different aspects. I would love for there to be, you know, I know that we have an online community, Facebook, but it doesn't feel very active. I feel like, you know, maybe another platform might work better than social media, where, you know, a lot of practitioners are not necessarily hanging out there, that we could have like a way to refer, you know, like, hey, who does this and who does that, and where there's a little bit more cross communication and cross pollination of gifts, frankly. I think that I would help me feel more connected to the Institute, as I feel right now, just kind of being here with all of you tonight. I think I crave that connection through networking and creating partnerships, and yeah.
Yeah, this has been really fantastic. And while I don't have a specific ... what I want to name is that I really appreciate you're asking the question and keep asking the question. That's something that CORE does. It's like, how can we expand? How can we grow? How can we do it differently? And that you come to the students and the alumni and ask and bring us together to support creating that. So I'm really loving the question. I like it a lot. Thanks.
Wondering, years ago, pre-COVID, there used to be New York City events where people could come together. I know that doesn't, involve everybody here, but that was a great way of building community outside of those weekends. There used to be a community night. I think just there's ways that people could meet in person with some activities, and there hasn't been anything like that in a long time. And I think some of the community building could be restored with events like that.
It is starting up again in New York City. Just, they've had 2 or 3. So keep your eyes peeled if you're on our Friday mailers. And again, it's specific to New York. My apologies. But, I don't know if any of you noticed, we are trying to extend our offerings in different cities in the last year as well for newbies, not necessarily for graduates. So thank you for flagging, Valerie, that that's something you enjoyed.
Are those events all posted in the Facebook group? Because I feel like I should know about that. I don't think I do. And I actually read the emails, but something is not connecting for me. Then.
Okay, I'll make sure we fire up the connectors a bit better.
and I think hi everybody. I think Isha, what you say about it's hard to know who's listening when we're talking. And I think that's something that, as I have had an eye on the alumni piece for the last few years, we're in the midst of really having our branding be exciting, because I think the history, and there's nothing wrong with it, but is that because there was a natural flow, and again, this is a New York City comment, so be that as it may, when COVID hit, people, the world got shifted, and how people choose to be in connection to each other, as we all know, changed dramatically. So I think we're in a rebuild where if someone puts something out, it doesn't necessarily, it's not coming from the Institute, or it's not coming from the broader community. And I think we know that now, because I've even noticing some, I look at this stuff pretty closely, but just because someone says they're doing something doesn't mean there's a wow factor that are having people notice. But I do notice that the sense of community that we all feel when we're in a space like this is palpable. I think we can all feel the energy, and that's what's so miraculous about this work. It's fun.
On that note,
so I invite. Oh, sorry, Lindsay.
I was just going to say on the note of. Oh, sorry. Let you finish, Laura.
Go for it.
Well, I was just going to say, Becky chimed in the chat that the core 3 and 4 students from last year have a practice building Telegram chat. So is that something that could be built out more broadly? So speaking to Isha, what you had named, and now Laura, what you're saying, are there those different digital infrastructures that we could build or help co-create to support that type of connection?
And one thing that I have noticed is it's not that core isn't happening in a big way once people graduate. It's just in lots of different places that we all don't know about. And that's the invitation, is to create something with that we feel.
And keep telling us what you're up to. Like, we want to hear from you. That's the other thing I just want to say. Like, there is so many beautiful things going on in the world. And I know, whatever, maybe we're not getting all the communications out properly, but tell us what you're up to, because many of you are up to really great things. And we love to showcase you or spotlight you or invite you to another one of these, right? Because there is a lot of amazing work. So, yeah. reach out to us too, because we'd love to hear from you. We really would. I'm wondering if there's any other questions before we sign off.
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. Laura, did you want
Oh, I
to?
see Craig Hopkins' hand up.
Okay.
Very
Oh,
good, sir.
okay.
This isn't the question. I just want to thank everybody for doing this. It was very helpful.
Mhm.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I don't think there's much for me to add. I think you've all said it all. I'm just filled with gratitude. I think that, from my own life path, as I, obviously have this new role as the chair of the board, hearing you all talk about your own paths has made me feel a really big yes to taking this role on. I feel it in a different way, and I just want to bring that in here because it's not, I didn't necessarily think I would be doing this, and yet it makes so much sense for me, and I want to give back, and I want us to take this work into the world, as Teresa brought in, that we want to feel like, how can we do this? At the same time, how do we really feel each other and feel the fabric of the community that exists? So I'm honored to be in it with you, and the old model, as Lindsay was saying, it's like if you were staying in the work, you were going to be on faculty, and that was the path, and that's one path. And as illustrated here this evening, there are many. So it's just very lifeless.
And I really just want to take a moment to thank you, Tristan, Valerie, Joanne, Teresa, Isha, for being here with us today. I know you gave of your time, and there was prep work that came into this, and sending me things to promote. So I just want to say that I deeply appreciate your willingness to be here and to share yourselves with us. So I'm very grateful. So thank you. And I'm also grateful for our audience, everyone. I haven't been able to see everyone that's out there, but I know we had over 60 something signups. So thank you for bringing your energy here, for being in community with us. We're grateful for you. We hope to see you more. And Laura's flagging. You want to say something, Laura?
Sorry. Two more things very quickly. One, I want to say that we are these days quarterly doing sanctuary services online. And I don't know if anyone's been able to attend them, but they're probably very similar to what you remember from your days at the Institute. And they're open to all, and it's really a lovely gathering in the tradition of CORE. Additionally, once CORE 5 is officially a go, which I think we're very, very close, this year we're opening the different weekends to alumni on a per diem basis, so that if there's a topic that's being offered as part of the Core 5 curriculum, and it's something you want to learn about, you're welcome to participate individually in a given weekend. And lastly, and most importantly, perhaps, Teresa Bullitt-Gordon, thank you for facilitating this evening.
Thank you.
And for everything you do for the Institute.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you all. And for any of you that may be new here to our core community, know that we also have some offerings. We have an intro weekend coming up in August. We have another intro in October. So we have the sanctuary service that Laura's talking about. So there's different ways to get connected. Please go to our website, check out our events page. And I think Lindsay might have put into the chat a few links. So those are there as well for you. So yeah, thanks again, everyone. I really appreciate you being here and feeling a lot of gratitude and filled. Thank you.